Am I the a-hole for canceling on our family cruise? My parents planned a family cruise for the holidays and invited me, 25F, my boyfriend, 27M, my brother James, 28M, and James's girlfriend, 26F. While it seemed like a nice idea at first, their approach to including me left a bitter taste in my mouth. Some context about my family dynamics will help explain why. James has always been the golden child. This favoritism has been evident my whole life. For example, in high school, James was caught selling pills, and my parents dismissed it as just a phase. However, when I got caught smoking weed, they threatened to kick me out. James has failed to complete college 3 times, losing scholarships along the way. Despite this, he remains their pride and joy. Meanwhile, I graduated a semester late and was told I didn't try hard enough. James currently lives in the state where he attended college, doesn't work or go to school, and relies on my parents for financial support. They pay his rent and send him money for living expenses. He even bought a $2,000 dog recently with their money. In contrast, when I landed my first full-time job at 22, they promptly removed me from their health insurance. I've always been expected to fend for myself. Last year, after I was laid off, I moved back in with my parents temporarily to save money while job hunting. When I finally got back on my feet, they demanded I pay $10,000 in back rent. This was never mentioned before I moved in, but I paid it off anyway to avoid conflict. When my parents organized the cruise, they bought tickets for themselves, James, and James's girlfriend. I was told to purchase my own ticket because I have a well-paying job. I was frustrated by this blatant favoritism. Why should I, the only one who has consistently worked hard and supported myself, be the only one excluded from their generosity? When I raised this issue, they brushed me off, saying I was being spoiled and jealous. They even had the nerve to say green isn't a good look on me. Their dismissiveness was the last straw. I decided not to go on the cruise, but instead of informing them immediately, I let them believe I was still planning to come. On the night before the trip, my parents told me to be at their house by 8 a.m. the next day to drive to the port. When 8:30 rolled around, they started messaging me, asking where I was. I replied, "Since you didn't want to put the effort in to have me join you, I will be attending my boyfriend's Thanksgiving instead. Have a nice trip with your favorite child." Then I muted the chat. Some of my friends think I was petty for canceling without warning, while others believe I should have sucked it up and gone anyway. Looking back, I can see why some might view my actions as passive-aggressive. I could have communicated better, but at the same time, I'm so exhausted by my parents' clear favoritism and disregard for my feelings. While I regret not addressing the situation more maturely, I don't regret skipping the cruise. Spending Thanksgiving with my boyfriend's family was a refreshing change. They treated me with kindness and warmth, something I rarely feel from my own family. So AITA for canceling on the family cruise? Or am I justified in standing up for myself after years of unequal treatment? Update. I wrote the original post during my break at work, and as soon as my day ended, my boyfriend and I left for the cabins his family rented for the holidays. It was such a lovely getaway, and I wanted to be fully present with them, so I didn't have a chance to check back in until now. When I opened up the post today, I couldn't believe how many people had chimed in. It was overwhelming, honestly. I deeply appreciate everyone who took the time to share their thoughts and experiences, even though I wasn't able to read through all of the comments. I tried, but after scrolling for 20 minutes straight, I got exhausted. So, instead of responding individually, I thought it would be easier to address some of the common themes I noticed and provide an update. If there's anything I miss or didn't answer clearly, let me know, and I'll do my best to fill in the gaps. For anyone who just wants the update and not the backstory, feel free to scroll past the next 10 paragraphs. I tend to ramble, so fair warning. Let's start with the $10,000 in back rent, which seemed to be the main topic of discussion in the comments. To clarify, the amount itself wasn't the issue for me. It's not like I was happy about it, but I could understand it to a degree. I was living with my parents, rent-free for over a year, while I got back on my feet, so I didn't feel like it was completely unreasonable. In fact, if I hadn't moved in with them, I probably would have drained my savings and gone into debt, trying to keep up with rent elsewhere. The problem was more about the way they sprung it on me without warning, after I'd already been living with them for months. During that time, I was doing my best to contribute in other ways. I worked a serving job and picked up some freelance writing gigs to help with groceries and other shared expenses, but I wasn't in a position to pay rent or utilities. That's why, when I landed my current job, my parents decided it was time to ask for back rent. They claimed it was partly to motivate me to move out, which I guess worked because I moved in with my boyfriend in September. Still, it felt unfair that they didn't set expectations from the start. Had I known about the rent, I would have planned my finances differently. Ultimately, I paid the money because I didn't see another option. Refusing would have created a massive conflict, and I've learned over the years that fighting with my parents is rarely worth the emotional toll. So I swallowed my pride and paid them back within 6 months. Thankfully, my job as a technical writer pays well, so I was able to manage both the payments and saving for my own place. For those curious about the timeline, I was laid off in January last year, finished out my lease in June, and moved in with my parents that same month. I lived with them until September of this year, and they brought up the idea of back rent in May, shortly after I started my new job. By the time I moved out, the total amount owed had reached $10,000, which included rent for the months following their initial demand. It wasn't technically all back rent, but calling it that made it easier to explain. As for the comments suggesting legal action, while I appreciate the idea, it's not something I'm interested in pursuing. We never had a formal agreement, and I don't think it's worth the hassle. The money is paid, and the chapter is closed. Rehashing it in court would only drag the situation out further, and I'd rather focus on moving forward. Looking back, I can see that I need to work on being less of a pushover. It's hard, though, because any attempt to stand up for myself has historically led to my parents calling me ungrateful. Growing up, I always felt the need to prove my worth, hoping they'd treat me with the same care and support they show my brother James. Speaking of James, that's another area that's been weighing on me. We were incredibly close as kids. He taught me to ride a bike, stood up for me when I was bullied, and we spent countless nights playing RuneScape together. He's not a bad person, but I think he's become too dependent on the preferential treatment he's always received. He doesn't seem to realize how it affects me or why I'd be upset. Instead, he urges me to suck it up and keep the peace. I miss the bond we used to have, but I'm not sure how to repair it while he remains so entrenched in our parents' mindset. Now, on to the Thanksgiving update. My boyfriend and I arrived at the cabin late Wednesday night, and I brought his mom a bouquet of her favorite flowers. She was thrilled, which set a positive tone for the weekend. We spent that evening chatting over a glass of wine before heading to bed. I'd been second-guessing my decision not to join my family's cruise, but I promised myself to focus on enjoying the holiday with his family instead. Thanksgiving Day was absolutely lovely. We helped his mom prepare the meal and set the table, then played a round of cornhole with his cousins. I lost miserably but had fun anyway. The food was incredible, and everyone went out of their way to make me feel welcome. At the end of the night, his mom even said she hoped I'd officially join the family one day, which nearly brought me to tears. I told her it would be an honor, and we shared a warm hug. The rest of the weekend was just as wonderful. We went hiking, roasted marshmallows by the bonfire, and played board games. Watching my boyfriend play Legos with his nephew even gave me a tiny case of baby fever. Not that we're rushing into that anytime soon. When we returned home Sunday, I already missed the peace and warmth of the cabin. It was such a contrast to the chaos and tension I usually associate with family holidays. Unfortunately, my parents weren't thrilled about my decision. My dad sent a passive-aggressive text with cruise photos, lamenting that I'd missed out on such beautiful places. I replied with a cheerful picture from my trip, saying, "Looks like you had fun, so did we." That seemed to annoy him. Later, my mom called to accuse me of holding a petty grudge against James and ruining their holiday memories. When I tried explaining my feelings about the unfair treatment, she doubled down, saying I should be grateful for their tough love and stop comparing myself to my brother. The conversation ended with her calling me cruel and suggesting I either fully reconcile or cut ties entirely. I told her I was tired of never feeling like enough for them, and hung up. My boyfriend was incredibly supportive, comforting me with ice cream and The Hunger Games, one of my favorite series. Now, I'm left grappling with whether to go low or no contact. My boyfriend and friends are supportive, but it's hard to let go completely. I still hope for reconciliation, even though I know it's unlikely. At this point, I'm just trying to figure out what will bring me the most peace moving forward.